Welcome back to another episode of the HETO Home Energy Show, where we are joined again by Max Waddingham, Operations Director for Good Energy.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
And today we've just had a great conversation all around energy suppliers and the energy supply market and the great work that Good Energy are doing and what the future could look like. But I think for both of us, we've talked before around the scale of the challenge we've got in front of us, and there's chunks we can take out of it, and I think for both of us, one of our specialist subjects is heat pump technology, and want to talk a little bit around the challenges from your experience in the industry, which you've gone from Vaillant to the Igloo Works and now into Good Energy as their ops director, but very much looking at the heat pump deployment in that space.
Yeah.
And just firsthand from your experience, where did you start in heat pumps? What were the challenges that we were facing in the heat pump industry when you first got into it, in comparison to what we're being faced with today?
Yeah, sure. So my first kind of foray into the heat pump side of life was during my time at Vaillant there in their system technologies team, which was that team was around predominantly new build properties. So your big developers doing heating designs, heat loss calculations, that sort of thing. And you started to see a bit of an increase in demand for renewables, albeit smaller scale developers, maybe a self-build, things like that. And very quickly, you kind of realize there's a lot more work going into certainly the calculations, the documentation that's required just to size a heat pump, just to give we weren't giving estimations for installation or anything like that. We were designing the heat loss calculation, saying what technology to use, maybe the odd running cost here and there. At that point, it was, heat pumps aren't by any stretch a new technology, but they're very new to domestic homes here in the UK. And straight away you saw kind of a bit of but they don't work. They're noisy, they're cold, they cost loads to run and things like that. So straight away that was there. But moving away from that side and away from the manufacturer towards now the installation side, very much customer facing, putting these in people's homes. Those kind of I would say heat pump myths are certainly louder. There's bigger voices shouting about them, and for some they are prohibitively expensive to fit a heat pump, and that's a challenge in and amongst itself, as well as an installation base, an installer base, which is still very, very much gas focused in this country. Boilers, I think over 1.5 million boilers installed a year, new boilers. Nowhere near that level with heat pump installations. So, it's seen as this
35,000 heat pump installations a year at the moment.
So it's still seen as this little bit of that's cute. You're getting a heat pump,
Are you one of those green people?
Yeah. You're one of those people.
Oh, you've been ripped off. That's the other comment that they get.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just seeing that market evolve, and there's. I'm happy to talk through the myths with anybody. I love having one of these myth busting kind of conversations, because for me it's just a lot of misunderstanding of the technology. You always see the one bad install that makes the papers or whatever. That's not unique to heat pumps, by the way. Those exist in boilers and all walks of life, bad installs. But they're just being seized upon at the moment because there's a little bit of a reluctance to change, I think. And for all the measures we kind of mentioned there, running cost of electric at the moment. We spoke in the kind of last segment about energy costs and the challenges there. I think all of these things just kind of snowball to make this this big barrier that you've got to overcome before you can even start speaking to a customer about heat pumps. You've got to overcome all of these objections before somebody will even pick up the phone and speak to you about having a heat pump.
It's a tough sell, though, isn't it?
It is.
I'm a fan of heat pumps. I always find it interesting when I talk to a lot of my heating engineer friends growing up, and they're still in the gas world now. And actually, there's lots of things at play, and there's lots of considerations that need to be had at that point at which you're switching from a boiler to a heat pump. But the capital cost part at the start, how much these systems cost in comparison to a boiler, if we're being honest at this stage, is you have to really be into this, because you're going to spend more to have a heat pump installed than you're going to spend to have a boiler. That has come down dramatically from where it used to be. With you get a £7,500 grant now, which certainly helps towards the total cost. In your experience, it's difficult to say what the average price is of a heat pump installation, but what are you finding at Good Energy is your sweet spot at the moment?
Our sweet spot for heat pumps, I mean, let's say pre-grant, we're probably somewhere around the 11, 12K mark before the boiler upgrade scheme's coming off. But what I would caveat that with is that we are not a cookie cutter installer. We kind of pride ourselves on taking the more bespoke jobs, the ones that, the cookie cutter type of installers wouldn't touch. Well, you've got that particular pipe work, you've got to change this, that, the other. We kind of pride ourselves on the fact that we will help any kind of willing consumer come up with a system solution that's good for them. And I think as a result, our jobs are a bit longer, a bit more complex, and probably a bit more kind of, expensive, based purely on the length of the job and the.
That's still actually good. I actually still think. I mean, so we're talking. Bear in mind, we're talking relative terms here, so that actually 11 to 12,000. When you then knock off the £7,500 grant, the customer's in for 4,500, 5,000, £6,000, which in relative terms for heat pump installations, which when you do the direct comparison to gas boilers, is they're a world apart, because you actually.
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? We're talking about £12,000 for a heting installation.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that is what we're talking about, isn't it? You're talking about a whole system installation in those bespoke worlds, and then I think with the trial installations that Heatio have been doing, we've been somewhere around kind of 2,500 in terms of total contribution from the customer, which gets closer to that space, but some innovative approaches around monitoring the home in advance of the technology being installed, really starting to kind of understand what that heat loss calculation is for monitoring the smart meter data, for instance, and seeing what the actual heat loss of the property is. Some clever stuff we've been doing around radiators as well, monitoring individual room temperatures to actually use data to size the radiators rather than the calculations. But that again is a world apart. We're talking about putting a heat pump in as essentially a direct replacement of a boiler, whereas you specialise in that world of whole system upgrade. It doesn't matter whether it's a boiler or a heat pump. You're going to be in for a few £1,000s to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm glad you used that phrase there, the whole system upgrade, because I it's one of my bugbears, and I've just fallen into that trap myself, where I said, oh yeah, the heat pump doesn't cost you £12,000. It doesn't. It's adapting the home for that. And you can get installations that are a lot cheaper than that. New build regulations are saying that homes need to be designed at 55 degrees and below. I mean, we're well in heat pump territory at that point. So, 10, 15 years when these are looking for heating appliance changes, it's not going to be anywhere near that kind of price, because a lot of the system's already done. The heat pump itself, relatively speaking, is comparable to a boiler, maybe a little bit more. The appliance isn't the issue. It's the changes. We have a notoriously kind of leaky housing stock in this country, big heat loads, kind of, open vented heating systems were Victorian kind of inventions, still being put in some new builds today. So a lot of it is adapting the house to work with a heat pump. And it's not to say that, we often hear, well, heat pumps don't work in leaky houses. Like, they work anywhere. If you can heat a house with a boiler, you can heat it with a heat pump. There is no kind of doubt in my mind about that. It's just, where are you willing to go in terms of cost? Do you want the OPEX or the operational expenditure, the running costs? Do you want those to be cheap? As a result, you're going to pay higher installation costs.
But that's always been the challenge, hasn't it, with heat pump systems, was because they were so expensive. I always take it there. I think Graham Hendra put it the best way. It's if you're sat in the pub and you're telling your friends you've just spent £12,000 on a heating system, you're going to have a hell of a good story as the level of savings you're getting, because, to the point where, if your friend sat next to you and go, I've just had my boiler replaced for £1,500. Why have you spent £12,000 on your heating system? You're going to have to end that story with, I'm either getting money back off somebody or this thing is saving me a fortune. and the unfortunate reality, and I don't want to play into the rhetoric of the engineers, the heating engineers that come on our kind of social media feeds and bash heat pumps, but the unfortunate reality is right now there is a type of person who's going for a heat pump system. They're willing to pay a bit more over and above the typical installation cost of just simply replacing their boiler. There is systems available now where you can essentially replace your boiler, but even with those, we'll probably, as I say, the trials we've done, it's a £2,500 installation. You'd probably get a gas boiler installation for anywhere between £1,500 and £2,000 as a direct replacement. It is a better system in terms of you're getting hot water storage, and you're future-proofing the heating system for the years to come, which we know gas prices are only going to go one way, and everything coming out of government is about energy security and decarbonising and saving and reducing electricity costs. So you've got a type of person who's making a very conscious decision at this time to have a heat pump installed, and it is either willing to going through a renovation potentially and looking for that whole system upgrade, or they're looking for something that they might do periodically over time where they put the heat pump in now. Maybe they'll start to upgrade a few radiators over time and make the system more efficient and start making those savings. But right now, you've got a high capital cost, upfront cost of having a heat pump installed. Running cost wise, if you kind of went for the middle of the range type system, are we seeing huge savings against gas and
so gas is always there or thereabouts. I think, this changes every time there's a price cap change. I think at the last time of reading, you needed an efficiency of about 340%-ish to be beating your kind of gas costs there. I think oil, LPGs, appliances, they're definitely the real kind of cost outlay kind of wins that you can have with a heat pump if you've got an oil boiler. Those kind of the supply chain with oil, heating oil is notoriously volatile in terms of pricing, and you've got this big tank in your back garden that you've got to kind of upkeep and things like that. But when it comes to gas, the running cost, the way the energy costs are worked out at the moment, there's the social levies on electric which aren't on gas. I think we touched on this in the last kind of discussion, but you're almost incentivizing that fossil fuel use there. So it does drive you to a particular type of consumer, somebody who's, I think, very conscious about their carbon, or, it might be a whole house renovation. Because when you look at it in that sense, if you're moving let's say a storage radiator system, you're upgrading a house and you need to put in a new wet heating system, that's not that far off the installation cost. If you're putting in a gas boiler, you've got to do a whole repipe, you've got to put radiators and stuff in there anyway. That's pretty competitive with a heat pump. It's
but we've got some big challenges around it as well, in terms of you've got the boiler replacement market, which has got to be the goal, hasn't it? We've got to get to that point where rather than 1.5, 1.7 million boilers going in every year, we've got heat pumps going in. And I can imagine if there's a gas engineers watching this show, they're going to be like, "Good luck with that." Exactly. I'm here for the long haul. Make no bones about it. We will do everything in our power to make it so that we simplify that journey on the way through to make that transition to a heat pump easier. But at the moment, as an industry, we have some huge barriers in our way. Cost is one. There's a negative perception around heat pumps as well, in terms of, I could probably just pick the top 3 comments on any social media feed that we put out, but they're too expensive. That's the capital cost. Yeah. They cost too much to run. Well, in reality, they run about the same cost as a boiler, so we can negate that one. They're noisy, which I think was I think people are reading blogs from 2014 on that one, so that we know now they're not noisy. You can go and stand next to one; they're actually quieter than the flue off a boiler. Yeah. So we're faced with, and you've got to upgrade your whole house and rip it apart again, which is a hangover from historical incentives, and now actually we're seeing plenty of installations going where you don't have to do that, as in mandatory, but you can go on that journey to having that work done, as you probably should with a boiler. You could, if you increased your radiator size with a boiler, and you'd run it more efficiently. So, that's the point that is kind of always missed, is that if you're installing a new heating system, you should be calculating that to 55 and below anyway. So you're already putting the measures in, certainly in the new build if you're bringing in a new system. But
if you're an installer putting in a new boiler for a customer, you want to be getting that temperature as low as possible from the flow pipe. If you can get that boiler into condenser mode at 50 degrees, you might need to upgrade a couple of radiators, but
that's it. It just wasn't done before.
Yeah, so it just wasn't done.
Now we're trying to do it properly.
What's coming off the wall? Let's put the same thing back on. Let's turn it on, and you can turn that flow temperature up, and that masks a lot of problems on the installation. That's I think why it was probably previously done. But certainly, we always say to customers, if they're on the fence about whether a heat pump work for them, turn your boiler down to 50, 55, see if it does. And there's always things you can do to bring those installation costs down. I said that we're quite bespoke. If a customer's coming to us and they might have a cylinder that they've just bought a year ago, it's a boiler cylinder, it's got a small coil in it. Like, well, I'd like to keep that because then I don't have to pay whatever amount for a new cylinder and the labour that goes with it, and that sort of thing. So an informed customer can make a choice. So in that scenario, we would, okay, let's look at that for you. It's not kind of recommended if you want the efficiency measures, but of course we'll look at it. We'll run the numbers. We'll give them some kind of calculations, estimations on running costs, and say, well, your immersion heater would come into play. You'd have longer periods to heat up your hot water. Your heat might be off for half an hour more than it otherwise would. But if you want to do that, here's the information. You're now informed. You can make a choice on that. We're not going to force efficiency down your throat if you don't want to go that way. If you want lower installation costs, we can make that happen. We can bring them down. The trade-off is that your running costs are going to be higher.
Exactly.
But that's not my decision to make for our customers. It's my job. It's our team's job to make the customer informed and let them decide what do they want to use their kind of money to do.
That's, when we spoke about this prior to the show, and that's such a refreshing approach to it. And I can imagine the heat pump installers watching this will be reeling in that. It's a whole house retrofit with heat pump top to bottom or nothing at all.
Yeah.
Whereas that is for the few and far between, and the reality is, if we're going to take a step towards mass market adoption, we have got to start taking into consideration what the customer wants, not what the installer is going to publicize as their highest seasonal coefficient of performance. We're not going to start taking chunks out of this market unless we start engaging with homeowners on the way through. And I think that approach of saying there is a compromise here between I always love these installers who post about efficiency levels of 500 and 550%. And you kind of say, well, that conversation around efficiency cannot be had in isolation without a conversation about how much that installation cost.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
you go, I'm now saving X, but I've invested Y. It's purely a return on investment play. So if you take that back a step and say you spend less on the installation, i.e. in that scenario, you haven't replaced your hot water cylinder, yes, you're compromising an element in your efficiency, but your return on investment is also going to be lower, or going to be over a similar period because you've spent less on the installation.
Yeah, exactly that. And we have a great setup with our customers. We monitor the heat pumps really well. We can make kind of changes to settings remotely. We've got a great technical team that look after our customers as well. There is absolutely no reason, and we make this clear to our customers, if you want to get a heat pump installed as cheaply as possible today, let's do it. We'll put a high flow temperature if that's what we work out with you is going to be the best course of action to get you decarbonized from your heating. We'd love to put in a 35-degree system in every house that's 500, 600% efficient, but frankly, we can't make that happen for everybody at the price point they want to be entering the renewable heating kind of sector with. So we can maybe make some changes to the design to up that flow temperature. I think on average, we change 4 radiators with our customers' jobs. But we can put it up to say 50 degrees that somebody else might go in and design 35, 40. So that OPEX is a little bit higher, but with the monitoring and the back office capabilities we've got, we can say to that customer, okay, well, if you want to save some money till next year, change these 3 radiators in these particular rooms. We can drop your flow temperature 5 degrees. We can do that remotely. We don't need to come out, you'll get the missed VAT savings that you would have doing it with a heat pump. But again,
you're paying that other way around anyway.
Yeah. So we can be flexible with customers. There is absolutely no reason somebody can't do a kind of staged installation process. And okay, let's do it over 3 years. Let's put the heat pump in today. Yeah, you'll pay a little bit more now. Next year, we'll bring your running costs down because you've made these couple of changes. We'll work with you to figure out what those changes need to be. Or a customer might, on the flip side, don't put in bigger radiators. I'm going to get extra loft insulation next year. Cool, that'll bring your heat load of your property down a little bit. those radiators can now cope at 40 where they were doing 45 before. So
it's such a clever approach to it. It's actually it might sound obvious to go down that route, but actually from the heat pump industry, that is actually a really innovative approach, because it's the majority of people are going down that kind of, the whole thing has to be designed at 35 degrees. And when you compare a boiler system that runs at 65, 80 degrees even, it's a huge difference. What's the, certainly one of the things that we've found recently with the, what we're calling the digital twin of a home, where we essentially, we capture a whole load of data around how a home's performing. And we started doing some trials with people that had never thought about a heat pump in their life, hadn't even heard of a heat pump, or had never considered putting solar panels on their home. They came to us under the looking for energy saving advice.
Right.
So we did some work there where we'd put we've got a monitoring system, the Heatio Home Hub, that we put into the home, which monitors temperature and humidity, outside air temperatures, climate data. And by capturing that data, along with their smart meter data and some information around occupancy, we start to be able to understand the energy profile of that home, specifically like looking at the things like the heating schedules and being able to extract that from their gas usage, and then simulating that impact of having a heat pump installed. And that might be the first time they've ever thought about a heat pump, but they're coming in on, can I get some advice on how to save energy? We monitor and model the home, and then that gives that ability to say, if we run the heat pump in this particular way, what it could look like. And it's kind of a curve of, the efficiency line obviously drops as the capital cost goes up. So there's a crossover point where somebody goes, I can afford that, and I'm happy to pay that for my energy bills.
Yeah, that's it. And it's working with the consumer to find that sweet spot. But what the consumers can't do is make that decision with no kind of input and help, because it's not, it's your and my area of expertise, home heating, heat pumps. We do this day in, day out. So it's quite easy for us to talk about that and understand it. But a consumer, you say there, never considered a heat pump, never heard of one. You kind of need to explain that and work with them. You can't just be going to those customers like, right, it's 30 grand and we're going to give you these efficiencies, because oh, well, that's too much. And there's not the understanding there. There's not the conscious choice. Like, oh, you can do things differently and it's going to be cheaper to install, but the cost's going to be higher. So it's just that willingness to work with people, I think, is key there, and not do necessarily that cookie cutter approach that I keep mentioning there. That said, there's a market for that. There are so many, 3-bed semi-detached houses which will be on the same floor plan. These big new build estates that are going up maybe 10 years ago, where there's 5 or 6 house types and they build 200 of them. So there is a place for that approach, but it's those, I guess, harder to treat properties, I would say. It needs to be the homeowner's choice. You can't just go and say, well, we as a company want to give you a 500% efficient install and that's it. Otherwise, we're not talking to you, because it's not. And
there's plenty of that goes on, unfortunately. Yeah. But what is the roadmap to this then? Because as you say, it's the homeowners at least should be presented with the choice and the opportunity. But I would imagine if there's 1.7 million boilers going in and 30,000, 40,000 heat pumps, they're not being presented with that choice. And that's traditionally, you've got a homeowner who already has a boiler in the home. If that boiler breaks, they're going to go to their local boiler installer. Or their mind is going to go directly to buying a boiler, maybe off a national, but there's a lot of installers out there, local installers, who are fitting those boilers. And I'm sure a lot of them will be the ones that are commenting on the feed saying that, they'll never in their life fit a heat pump. Where does that change come in? How do we, when an installer, and I'm talking, these are reputable installers. These are perfectly good at the job. These aren't cowboys. These are people who are experienced installers of fitting boilers, but are making that statement of, I will never fit a heat pump. I will never put a heat pump in front of my customer. How do we get to those installers? How do heat pumps get to those installers? What is that journey that either we need to go on as heat pump professionals, the industry needs to go on? What is the thing that's going to really turn that dial?
Very good question. So yeah, you're talking there about very, very skilled people. They've been working in heating industry, decades in some cases, a lot more experience than I am, certainly in heating. And what we're doing is talking about changing their daily bread and butter, boilers, cylinder changes. Like, oh no, we're not doing that appliance anymore. We're doing this one. So of course, there's going to be some resistance to that, and it goes hand in hand. We said there about it's a relatively new technology in domestic heating in the UK. People don't know much about it, and change is difficult. Change is a bit scary, but I think busting the myths, certainly, information about it's not going to leave you cold. It's not going to leave you kind of paying through the eyeballs for electricity prices. And they are very easy to live with, very easy to install. I mean, we don't go out and hire kind of thoroughbred renewable engineers. We're recruiting from the same pool that everybody else is, which is established heating engineers that have been doing boilers for 10, 20 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. So it's just seeing that this is the way the trend in the country is hoping to go. What we really need is clear direction from kind of government to maybe get off the fence a bit about hydrogen, and electrification of heat is where we are going. I think once that starts to come in and you start to see the market pull in that way a little bit more. I keep talking about EVs, but nobody wanted to be an EV servicing technician until there were loads of them on the road. And I can make a few quid out of this. Yeah. The market needs to move in that way, and then the numbers you talk about there are crazy. 1.6 million boilers, 30 to 40,000 heat pumps. Of course, they are looking at boilers. They could do 6, 7, 8 boilers a week.
Why would you not?
Why wouldn't you? So I think the market needs to mature. Certainly,
it's a difficult sell as well. Even if you were inclined to put that opportunity towards your customer, then if you just look at the basic economics of it, your boiler's broken. I can come and fit you a different boiler, and it's going to cost you £1,500 to £2,000, or I could give you this green boiler that sits outside that runs on electric that's going to cost you maybe £3,000-4,000. But and they go, okay, well that's great. Am I going to save a load of money? It's going to be about the same as what you're paying on the gas.
Yeah,
it's a difficult sell for us trying to do it on a daily basis. So somebody that's kind of saying, I've got these two options for you.
Yeah,
I'm, as the installer, going to get paid the same regardless of which one you go for. It would be very nice if you went for the green one, but I think those levers that need to be pulled around the cost of installation, first and foremost, it's got to get to the point where the cost of installation is comparable. And I think we'll do that through simplifying technology and simplifying the installations. And then when consumers are coming to the table and they've got a choice, if we've seen it a little bit in the boom of solar PV, but if I always think back to a friend of mine he was a heating engineer in Anglesey in North Wales. It was very much oil. There was very little natural gas, and I remember having conversations with him over beers in the pub. Him telling me I'd got into completely the wrong industry. Being from North Wales, he was like, "Why the hell are you going down the bit of heat pumps?" And for him, he said he will be oil for life. He will see out his days in oil. And one critical factor came in, which completely changed his view on the market. And any gas engineer watching this thinking these guys are talking rubbish, I'll never see a heat pump in my life. This guy couldn't have been more against heat pumps. Fundamentally, he would laugh at the fact that any of his customers would go for it. And he had a network that he'd built up over a period of time of replacements and servicing of oil boilers across North Wales. And all of a sudden, his customers were coming to him saying, "Oh, my boiler's broke now, but I want one of these heat pumps going in." And he'd roll out the rhetoric.
Yeah,
they're a waste of money. They don't work. They're too expensive to run. And initially, customers would go, "Oh, fair enough. If he's saying that, then I believe it, and I won't go down that route." Then an installer in the area got accredited to fit heat pumps. And then the installer in the area started fitting some heat pumps because he was giving the positive message about heat pumps. And then this installer one day was sat there with a customer and they told him exactly, they don't work, they're too expensive, they're too noisy. And that consumer was able to reference their customer, their neighbour, and say, "Joan's got one. She says saving her a fortune. It's not noisy at all. And all of a sudden, he'd lost his rhetoric. That wasn't a good enough argument anymore. And then that homeowner went with the installer from next door. So not only did he lose that installation, but he lost any service and maintenance contracts with that homeowner who he'd built a relationship with at the time. And that story started to spread. There was now 2 homeowners in that area, and they were both able to reference it. So he couldn't use the argument because, especially in these villages within North Wales, people talked. So that he couldn't sit there and say they don't work because there was 2 case studies that said they did work. They couldn't say it was too noisy because there was 2 case studies in the area that said they weren't noisy. And I remember the day he sent me a selfie of him sat in a training academy going, I've been broken, I'm here.
It's really interesting story that as well, because I completely kind of missed talking about that one, but consumers are going to drive as well. Like you say there, if the consumers start talking about wanting to adopt this kind of new renewable technology, all of a sudden you've got to know more about it. When you find out more about it, it's not all bad. It's it's not that article I read in the Daily Mirror or whatever. It's actually working. And our customers at Good Energy, certainly our heat pump installation customers, are our biggest advocates.
That's it.
You look at some of our Which Trusted Trader reviews, things like that. Our customers love the technology and like, I wish I'd made the switch sooner. And
but you need them. Those early adopters are so important in this journey.
They are, and we're still in that phase. Very much still in that phase as well.
But it'll break as it breaks through that, and that's the thing is, if I was a gas engineer that was kind of conveying negative messages around heat pumps, I completely understand it right now, because it is such the things they say about them being costing more than a boiler. Absolutely right. Running costs are about the same as a gas boiler, so I think that's gone. But it's still there they're not making like dramatic savings unless you've got solar panels and batteries and everything else coupled with it. But I would certainly be saying, this is coming, and at the moment, as much as it's very difficult to put that in front of a customer and say pay more for this boiler or this green boiler that sits outside, running costs the same. The way the energy market is going, if electricity prices are coming down and gas prices are going up, there's a duty of care there at least to say, there's a consideration around this other unit. It might cost you a bit more now, but actually the running costs are going to come down in the future. And here's some information on how the UK is moving forward with electrification of energy networks, decarbonisation of our energy network. So this feels like there's a strong reason to at least put it on the table, whether or not you want to do it. But I would imagine putting it on the table means you've got to go and get the training and get the accreditation to actually offer it in your own right. Yeah,
you can't talk about what you don't know for sure. But I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think we're talking about running costs today, break even, maybe a bit cheaper than gas. It changes with the price cap, but some days they're cheaper, some days they're a bit more. If the more efficient the install, as in the more OPEX, the less OPEX, but the more CAPEX you've put in, the more you've paid for the install. Efficiency comes up, running costs comes down. As the kind of tariffs evolve and the pricing comes down, it's renewable energy. You can't flex the demand on a boiler. You burn gas, it's got the same energy in it. Now from the same source, wherever we've drilled that from in the North Sea. You can't be saying, well, there's an abundance of gas at the minute, so we're going to give you a cheap gas rate. So what you're paying today is what you're paying kind of forever. Price might change a little bit, but there's no innovative gas tariffs out there. So as the market moves to a more kind of smart outfit, more smart setup, it's more flexible. All of a sudden, there's this possibility to unlock huge savings with electrified heat.
Yeah.
And the other thing that a lot of people kind of don't necessarily realize is home heating is as big an emitter in this country as transportation. It's crazy. It's the amount of CO2 or equivalent that's emitted by boilers. And it's that piece that, we really need some kind of robust and solid kind of strategies and policies as a country to follow, because while there's a bit of uncertainty around what we're doing in terms of hydrogen, electrification of heat, is clean heat market mechanism going ahead, is it not? People are always going, I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see.
We've had that for so long as well, and the policies coming in and out, and no real commitment behind it. But that's why there's a lot of times where it's like the industry is driving some innovation here. You guys are driving innovation just in that approach you take towards the installations. And I think the more innovation we have, the more organizations that get involved in this and start looking at it from the different angles, whether it's from a financing perspective, whether it's challenging the design characteristics around some of this stuff, because we have got a challenge in the fact that We've got 80% of our homes are on the gas network. 80% of those homes have combi boilers, and we're saying, well, have a heat pump, and now we've got to find somewhere to put your hot water storage. Heat Geek have done an incredible innovation in their
mini store.
In the mini store, I think again, it's stuff, things like that if you'd have gone back 2 years, nobody would have thought about that. And to have something like that where you can say, right, you not only do you tick the box to get the £7,500, but you've now got a little heat store that you can put in, and you essentially, your heat pump becomes a combi boiler. Genius little innovations like that are the thing that are going to drive the industry forward. But it's kind of saying, gas installers, the not just the heat pump industry, but the decarbonisation industry, £10 billion of government money going into net zero innovations, will come in for those gas installations.
Yeah.
And, at least starting to put your head above the water and start looking around. Fair enough if you're in the last 4 or 5 years of your working life and you're thinking, I'm heading towards retirement, I don't need to worry about this. But if you're new entrant into the market, you've just got your qualifications and you're just coming out as a heating engineer thinking of going on your own, you've got to have an eye on this, because it's coming after your customer base if you don't.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at, where we as a country, we as a world are going, climate change, countries setting targets, Paris agreements, all sorts of things like that. It's a reduction in fossil fuels. And where you see fossil fuels used in your home, there's 3 places normally would be your cooking, would be your heating, and would be your vehicles. Vehicles are already much under transition. Induction hobs are very much established in houses now. There's electric resistance heaters for a long time. So, what's left there? It's the heating.
It's next on the list.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's a big one to go after.
It is a very big one to go after.
And there's some huge names coming into that space. We've already got, obviously, big names in the boiler industry. You mentioned Valent earlier today. Their transition, they've got a heat pump manufacturing line now, and are doing very well in that space. But when you look at the scale of some of the organisations that have traditionally not been in that space, but been in maybe more commercial or certainly maybe in Europe, where we have heating and ventilation systems and air conditioning systems that are delivering heating and cooling into homes. When you look at the likes of Panasonic coming, making a big play into the UK market right now, Samsung, Daikin, Mitsubishi.
Yeah.
These aren't small players. These are organisations that are making a big play for the UK market, because we can see that transition come in, and they're already well established across the world.
They are, and a huge corporate backing.
Yeah.
And you'd be thinking Samsung entering the heat. I say entering; they've been in the heating industry for years, decades, with commercial stuff. But they're not your traditional boiler manufacturer. So it indicates a change in shift of who's manufacturing these things. Obviously,
and who's installing them. I think that's going to be a big factor.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these guys, Mitsubishi, I think you pointed out there, Daikin, huge air conditioning kind of backgrounds there. Air conditioning installer bases, refrigeration cycles, things like that. Very, very different kind of installation measures to, I would say, gas boilers. But there's a lot of industry being put towards decarbonising heat in this country, and I think it's just a stone that's just starting to roll, rather than something that's quite established and well on its way. So
we'll see it grow.
In a few years, we'll be having this conversation. Do you remember when we were
what's
saying,
next? That's the thing. What's next on the list? I think that's all we've got time for today, Max. Thank you very much for coming in. It's been great to chat with you. Love chatting about heat pumps.
It's been my pleasure.
And I like to think with the way we run these shows now and the more experience we're getting with them, I think fast forward 12 months, 2 years, and we get you in again and see what the industry looks like then.
Hopefully I'll be too busy to come on the show at that point.
Rigging you from a heat pump installation. Thank you very much, Max.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.